I'm Meagan Hatcher-Mays, Director of Democracy Policy at Indivisible and the host of Impeachment Daily, the only daily impeachment recap program that paid $14.99 for Wi-Fi to watch the impeachment hearings on an airplane yesterday. Impeachment Daily exists to demystify the impeachment process and let you know how you can stay involved in this fight. I'm so happy to be back here with you all because there was a ton of impeachment news over the last couple of days, so I'm back right in the nick of time, I think, including a public hearing in the House Judiciary Committee where we heard directly from constitutional law experts about the stunning breadth of Trump's impeachable conduct. Plus, we got an update from Speaker Nancy Pelosi about the next steps in the impeachment inquiry. So things are heating up here in DC. Let's get right into it with our first segment, which is called What Just Happened?, where we recap what we know. Well, yesterday, the House Judiciary Committee held its first public hearing on impeachment. As you know, the House Intelligence Committee held several of its own hearings over the last couple of weeks, where we heard directly from witnesses like Marie Yovanovitch, the former ambassador to Ukraine, who, was the victim of a smear campaign perpetrated by Rudy Giuliani, of course, the president's personal lawyer. We heard from Gordon Sondland, the ambassador to the European Union, who, confirmed under oath that Trump, yes, tried to bribe Ukraine in exchange for investigations into Trump's political rivals. We heard from Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, a national security expert who was on that call between Trump and the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and who overheard Trump try to bribe him. I would like you to do us a favor, though. And we heard from Fiona Hill, who testified that Trump and his cronies were not pursuing legitimate foreign policy objectives in Ukraine. They were pursuing personal favors to help Trump win re-election in 2020. And we heard from a ton more witnesses too, all with roughly the same tale, right? Trump is corrupt, and so is the rest of his administration, right? The Judiciary Committee, though, is taking a little bit of a different tack. So instead of bringing in witnesses like those we've already heard from, the committee brought in some constitutional law scholars who could speak to Trump's corruption and establish his behavior rises to the level of impeachable conduct, just the way the framers would have understood it when they drafted the Constitution. So the Democrats brought in 3 law professors to testify. Noah Feldman from Harvard, Michael Gerhardt from UNC, and my personal favorite, Pamela Karlan of Stanford. So the 3 Democratic witnesses were, in agreement that Trump's conduct constitutes a serious abuse of power. You don't have to be a constitutional law scholar to know that. Professor Gerhardt said that Trump's serious misconduct, including bribery, soliciting a personal favor from a foreign leader in exchange for his exercise of power, and obstructing justice and obstructing Congress are worse than the misconduct of any prior president. That's really important because, as Professor Gerhardt put it, if what we're talking about is not impeachable, then nothing is impeachable. Professor Feldman of Harvard agreed with that assessment. He testified that Trump's behavior clearly constitutes a high crime and misdemeanor under the Constitution. Strong agree, Professor Feldman. And Professor Karlan really didn't hold back. She's the best. She should be on the Supreme Court. She said, the evidence reveals a president who used the powers of his office to demand that a foreign government participate in undermining a competing candidate for the presidency. The evidence shows a president, this is Trump, who delayed meeting a foreign leader and providing assistance that Congress and his own advisors agreed served our national interest in promoting democracy and limiting Russian aggression. And it shows a president who did this to strong-arm a foreign leader into smearing one of the president's opponents in our ongoing election season. That is not politics as usual, at least not in the United States or any other mature democracy. It is, instead, a cardinal reason why the Constitution contains an impeachment power. Put simply, a candidate for president should resist foreign interference in our elections, not demand it. Good stuff from Pam Karlan. Here's what these witnesses are getting at, right? Our democracy depends on Trump being held accountable for this behavior. If we let this go, it will embolden future corruption from the Oval Office. So to reiterate what Professor Gerhardt said, if what we're talking about is not impeachable, then nothing is impeachable. If we don't do something to show Trump that this is completely unacceptable, then it will happen again. Impeachment exists in the Constitution to deal with someone exactly like Donald Trump. Doing nothing here in this situation means that the Constitution means nothing. It means that our democracy means nothing. That's why this is so important. That's why this is so critical. That's why these witnesses took this so seriously yesterday. With that said, I'm sure you're wondering if the Republicans got to bring in their own witness, and they did. His name is Jonathan Turley. He's a self-described Democrat, and he is a constitutional law professor at George Washington University. My condolences to the students there. Here's the main thing you need to know about Jonathan Turley. He's kind of like a professional contrarian who does not apparently have any closely held beliefs or principles, as far as I can tell. He just mostly wants to be on TV. And in fact, back in the 90s, he did get to be on TV because he testified against Bill Clinton at Clinton's impeachment inquiry in the House. His whole thing back then was, hey, take it from me, I'm a Democrat, and I think Bill Clinton should be impeached. Okay, very contrarian, Jonathan. Now, today, his whole thing is, hey, take it from me, I'm a Democrat, but I don't think Trump should be impeached, even though Trump has undermined our democracy, even though Trump has admitted to asking Ukraine for help, even though Trump's own people have confirmed that he tried to bribe Ukraine. All of that is apparently fine in Jonathan Turley's world. But the worst part, I think, is that Professor Turley didn't even offer any substantive constitutional arguments for his position that Trump's behavior doesn't rise to the level of impeachable. I mean, first he complained that this process is moving too fast, that the impeachment trial is going too quickly, even though the Constitution doesn't say anything about how fast or slow an impeachment inquiry should move. That's not a constitutional argument, that's like a political argument. Not to mention the fact that Trump has been the president and has been doing crimes for the last 3.5 years or so. I mean, I don't know how much longer Professor Turley thinks this should take, but then Turley complained that Trump's attempted bribery hadn't been sufficiently proven because the House hadn't heard from witnesses who were directly involved, like people like John Bolton and Mick Mulvaney. Well, look, first of all, it's not true that the House hasn't heard from witnesses who were directly involved. As you recall, Colonel Vindman was on that call between Trump and Zelensky. Gordon Sondland, Trump's own ambassador to the European Union, was directly tasked by Trump himself to get these investigations into the Bidens, not to mention people like Fiona Hill, Marie Yovanovitch, who knew that Trump wasn't pursuing legitimate foreign policy plans in Ukraine. He wasn't pursuing legitimate anti-corruption measures over there, right? I mean, to be fair to Jonathan Turley, it is true that the House hasn't heard from people who are very deeply involved, like John Bolton, Mick Mulvaney. I will give you one guess as to why that is. I'll give you one guess as to why we haven't heard from these people. It's because Trump himself is blocking them from testifying, of course. These guys are defying subpoenas at Trump's direction. Another word for that, Jonathan Turley, is obstruction of Congress. Not turning over documents, not cooperating with a congressional investigation, that's obstruction of Congress, and that's an impeachable offense. So, that's what just happened. Now let's talk about what is happening. Well, after all that drama yesterday, we have big news. Speaker Pelosi announced this morning that the House is officially going to start drafting the official formal articles of impeachment. The House Judiciary Committee has already said that they're going to hold a hearing this Monday on the 9th to publicly debate and take a vote on which articles to include. Now, we don't know yet exactly which articles might make it into the final resolution, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that there will be quite a bit on Ukraine, on foreign interference in our elections. It's kind of the centerpiece of this whole investigation. But in Nancy Pelosi's press conference this morning, when she announced that these formal impeachment articles are being drafted, she also talked a lot about how Trump interfered in the election in 2016 as well, that he was up to no good in 2016, and he already had the wheels in motion to do some mischief in the 2020 elections as well. So who knows for sure what that might mean, but it sounds like to me that some of the stuff from the Mueller report might make its way into the final articles of impeachment. That would be obstruction of justice, possibly. As you remember, I'm sure, Trump fired the director of the FBI, James Comey, and then he said the reason he did it is because he didn't want Comey to investigate his dealings in Russia. So that's obstruction of justice, Donald. That's a crime. So that might be in there. We're also keeping an eye to see if maybe any of the self-dealing and self-enrichment stuff with respect to Donald Trump's hotel might make it into the final articles of impeachment. He, as you know, did not divest from his business. He still makes a lot of money off of his hotel, especially in DC. It's a big emoluments clause violation. It's a clause in the Constitution that prohibits the president from accepting gifts from foreign leaders and self-dealing and corruption and that sort of thing. I'm not sure if you know this, but when foreign leaders come to DC to meet with the president or meet with members of his cabinet, they purposely stay in his hotel to try to curry favor with Donald Trump. That is illegal. So we'll see if that makes it into the final list of impeachment articles. So stay tuned. Things are moving quickly. This hearing is happening on Monday, which means that we might have a vote on the final impeachment articles before Christmas. Could even happen the week of December 16th, which means we cannot let our foot off the gas. So, as you know, we're planning a huge mass mobilization for the night before the final vote on the impeachment articles in the House. Like I said, we don't know the exact date, looking like sometime the second or third week of December, probably. So if you go to impeach.org, you can pre-register for an Impeachment Eve event, and as soon as we know the date, we will contact you, and then we will take to the streets. Very important to turn out and show the Senate how much this means to the grassroots and how much it means to all of us to preserve our democracy by removing Trump from office. So go to impeach.org and pre-register your event today. Thank you so much for tuning in to Impeachment Daily. So glad to be back, and I will see you tomorrow.